Oh, and we're live. Okay. Okay, good morning. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and it is Tuesday, February 17th, and we are starting our morning talking with folks from Department of Fish and Wildlife and about S224 and some language that they have off. And I would love to bring you on. So, and just to clarify, there's a portion about the use of public access points. And then there's, did you also want to speak to fishing tournaments?
I certainly could.
Okay.
I certainly could. I can talk about the language that we offered and we can get as granular as you like about any of it.
Sure.
But generally, yeah.
Well, and just, we are starting a little bit later than anticipated, so 15 minutes, okay?
I'll get out of the way quicker.
Okay. And again, just to clarify, this was language that we did, or at least partially put into the latest draft, but
Is that 4.2?
yes.
Okay.
But I was mentioning to the committee earlier that I should have had you come present this first before putting it in, and it's still, I think, an open question as to whether or not this is the direction we should go.
Okay, well, I appreciate that very much. For the record, I'm Jason Batchelder, Fish and Wildlife Commissioner. Thank you so much for having me and all the work you put into this bill. I had that language from this morning, but I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but that's okay. I read it no more than an hour ago. So I think generally, I feel like the department is at a point where we're generally leaning toward being opposed to the efforts of the bill. We submitted the language that we submitted to you in a way to be helpful, but I still feel as though we're trying to manage. I hope I'm saying this in the nicest possible way, in spirit of collaboration, appreciative of how much effort is going on and the intent behind what you're doing. I appreciate all of it very much. But I do feel as though we're looking at a couple of generally minor issues that can seem conflated at times. The sort of loss of control and decontamination stations, and then the access piece that is the fishing tournament management, which is essentially one person trying to force his way through what he thinks is doing the right thing. You may understand that fishing tournament was canceled. I don't know about the subsequent fishing tournament, but we're dealing with a couple of very specific spots, and I feel as though one of them is regrettable because we feel like we've lost some ground with Thurman Dix, and we were able to fish it, and I was the warden there, and I thought the things were harmonious. And then all of a sudden that's gone, and now we're looking at regulation around that specific body of water and other bodies of water that are similar. When I think looking at the problem that we're trying to solve is nearly non-existent. And looking at anglers and users of bodies of water as folks who might pollute or create a biosecurity issue are simply not haven't happened. And I would add having folks access a place like that. Not that I'm proposing to run afoul of Mr. Grillcaster, I'm not. But having wardens present was always a wonderful thing there, thinking of helping clean up trash and keeping folks fishing where they were supposed to be. So that's my thought around there. And sort of the loss of control piece around mandating decontamination stations through regulation is a real one for us. But I think more importantly, would like to point at our access area manager and how far he goes to permit activities that are not priority uses, and including decontamination stations for all the benefits of AIS control, which we share with DEC and we share with you and Vermonters. We're talking about one place where we're having trouble locating a decontamination station. And not that we're without options, but we're certainly hopeful that our thoughts are taken seriously there, and mandating that or suggesting that we're not neighborly in all other access areas is simply untrue. We go out of our way to permit a lot of things at those access areas. I realize I'm bouncing all over the place. I'll get to the language that we offered. So we did go after meeting with Mr. O'Grady, we did go to our individual who manages fishing tournaments. And he proposed language that we thought would be helpful to the conversation, and that's I think simply around specific bodies of water where a municipality owns all the way around, and having applicants identify access points. We thought that could be helpful. We're still generally of the mindset that we don't necessarily feel like this language is necessary, and we don't want to give the impression that we would ever support something that gave municipalities the ability to manage fishing for.
So just to clarify, so you're speaking now about the fishing tournament portion?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, they're jumping in my.
Is this the language on page 19 of the draft?
And
That's it highlighted?
In mine, yeah, highlighted yellow.
Okay.
And the language that you were proposing for the tournaments is not what's reflected here.
Correct.
Oh,
We proposed, I can just read it to you. Applications to hold a fishing tournament on a water of the state which serves as a public drinking water source for a municipality, and where the municipality owns and controls all the land surrounding the water shall be submitted on a form issued by the commissioner. Form shall require the applicant to identify an access point to waters for participants in the tournament. And if the access point is on a private right of way, the applicant shall indicate whether the applicant has secured permission to use the right of way for the proposed tournaments. That was the language offered by our fishing tournament specialist.
Is that something that you could forward to our committee assistant, so
Sure thing.
we can?
I can send it right.
Okay, just.
Yeah. Again, helpful language that seems to get at the issue, but it also doesn't capture every scenario, and it doesn't offer an enforcement or enforceability piece to those access points. It simply says identify them for us if it's on a private right of way. I think it's a bit of a concession and a helpful tool to a situation like Thermodix, where if you identify a point, that's where people are going to go, and that's where they can be turned away or managed, right? Or managed in another way that's easier than having folks come on from a dozen different access points, which isn't a possibility at Thermodix because it's all right. And almost everyone agrees on that. But I'm happy to take questions, but
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'm interested to see the language you propose, but I think the way you read it, it doesn't include any kind of communication with the municipality, does it? Because I think does it actually, just to make sure?
what I just read does not require.
Because you may have heard me talking with other witnesses about the whole communication issue, because it seems like part of the problem that arose that brought us to this bill was a lack of communication, like the municipality was surprised and not consulted with about the fishing tournament. And given that it's their drinking water and they own all the property.
Sure.
Kind of surprising that there wasn't even just a, hey, heads up.
In fairness, I did call Mr. Strelka and had a long phone conversation with him. He told him the tournament was coming, that I planned to approve the program. That may have been lost along the way, and there was no formal letter or email communication, but I did call him directly and we talked this through.
Well, that's good to know. I'm just wondering, it seems to me that having that communication as part of the process would be helpful. I'm also wondering, when there is a fishing tournament, part of the conversation in here has been about, big events that cause expenses for the city or place where they are, the municipality where they are. And I don't believe the fee that for fishing tournaments covers that necessarily. It covers the expense of your department issuing the permit, but does it cover other expenses like, trash removal or extra security or parking issues or anything like that?
To my knowledge, it does not. And I can think of a few expenses that might be incurred in a specific place like Thurman Dix. But therein lies the challenges of holding one there. And I feel as though, and I'm not deflecting, I'll certainly answer your questions. But exposing the fact that this was public water was more the effort for this fishing tournament. I haven't spoken to the gentleman about that specific desire behind the effort, but I think pointing at this water as being public and not the property of an entity or a person was the goal. I think it implies that a tournament like this leaves piles of trash and X, Y, and Z, and I would say that perhaps if the place was like a Mallett's Bay or a focused area, then it might. But I can't see that. I've used the Caspian Derby in this instance before. The Caspian is a place for folks access from dozens of places. And we sit here in 2026 without a finger pointed at that entity that happens year after year after year. No trash, no.
Yeah.
You name it.
Yep.
And I get that. And I completely get the focus that a drinking water source would bring, but I also point to the dozens and dozens and dozens of other places that are drinking water sources, that just because the town doesn't own all the way around doesn't mean that they're not exposed to effluent or right. And saying that because this is protected and that anglers would be allowed on it, it is now unprotected, doesn't sit well with me. I think it's a wash. I really think it's an opportunity discussion, and certainly not without its challenges. This would be an adaptive challenge for folks to say, well, we can do this for 100 years now, we can, but right down the road, I think it is a prime example of a place that's worked fairly well over the last 10 years, and in Berlin Pond, and I know that that's not without its raw nerves either. I completely get that.
My understanding is that at least the testimony we heard from the city of Barry is that Dick's Pond, is it a pond? Dick's Reservoir. Dick's Reservoir is open for fishing. It's just not on with motorized vehicles. I think that's correct, but maybe I'm misunderstanding that.
Generally, at one time, until recent history, maybe within a few months, people could walk to the shore in 3 designated locations and fish from shore.
Okay.
They did not want motorized vessels,
Right.
and I'm not saying either.
Yeah.
The individual that was pushing the boundaries of those rules was in a paddlecraft. But nobody has any will to put a motorized boat on there, at least to my knowledge.
Okay.
I haven't spoken with this.
Okay.
But yes, they were allowing fishing at 2 ends and then a middle.
Okay.
Process. Yeah.
That's what I thought, and I think they may have paused that while all of this is going on, but traditionally they fell out fishing there.
They have.
Yeah. Okay.
Not ice fishing, which brings up another issue for us, but that's
Not a battle you're gonna fight too, okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. One of the reasons this is difficult is because it's a drinking water source. And I'm wondering if, as a part of your process, do you have any coordination with DEC who regulates drinking water?
I think early on in the processes of use of public water, yes, but in crossover at the moment a permit is issued, I don't think there are communications there, not to say that there aren't considerations.
Yeah.
I don't think we call, but I mean, they work in the same building, so maybe, but
more informally than formally.
exactly.
And then I want to go back to the prioritized list of the use of
Sure.
public access points. Is that what we call them?
Sure, access areas.
Access areas.
Yeah. Well,
The language that you all wanted is in version 4.2. Does not put boat wash stations, decontamination, aquatic invasive prevention in the list. It just makes it a permitted use. So someone would have to apply and then get a permit to do to have one of those stations. Is that accurate?
I believe that's accurate.
Let me
Did
say
did you catch that? Sorry.
So. As it's in 4.2, it doesn't put aquatic invasive prevention stations of any kind in the prioritized list, just makes it a permitted use.
Right, so for the record, this is Hannah Smith with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the language that we had discussed with Mr. O'Grady in the access area rules currently, section 4.6 talks about any other use permitted by the commissioner. And so the language that we proposed does specifically refer to decon stations there. It just doesn't create a separate authorized use. Instead, it proposes, I can find it, that this would be, instead of this being an authorized use, this would be one of the permitted special uses. So permitted special uses, including the establishment of approved aquatic nuisance inspection stations for boat washing. So it does refer to them. That's sort of a, it articulates that this use might be authorized, but it would require a permit from the commissioner.
And why, I think I need again from you all, why not put it in that list?
Because there are certain circumstances where actually locating a decon station at an access area would interfere with the priority uses for which the access area for which the funding was granted. And that creates, it does create a legal issue with us around the funding, the federal funding and the regulations that apply to the access areas that require we maintain them for the uses for which they were originally granted.
So two things. One is just now you were using the phrase decon, which is for wake boats, but I'm thinking about boat washing stations in general, that this is a goal we have, right, to keep our lakes clean. So is what you were saying, does that apply also to boat washing stations or just decon stations?
The way I coached the language from what Mr. O'Grady had originally drafted, so including establishment of approved aquatic nuisance inspection stations for boat washing or to decontaminate wake boats pursuant to 10 VSA 1420.
And why not put that at a lower, so there's a list, right, of uses. Why not just fit it into the list behind whatever uses are mandated for federal funding?
I think the concern with adding this as an explicitly authorized use is the issue that the commissioner articulated, that if it is an authorized use, the department no longer has any oversight. And that loss of control creates potential interference with the uses for which the access areas were granted. So it's the distinction between an authorized use and a permitted use. If we have some oversight to make sure that there's no interference, that reduces our concerns about conflict with our federal funding sources.
And if it's permitted, you can say here, not there.
These are conditions associated with the location, the use, when it can be there, if it's a mobile washing station, when it might, permit conditions that would make it, that would prevent any interference with the priority uses.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've been careful about this conversation or trying to make the distinction between boat washing stations and decontamination stations, because the decon are like major hot water spray out of massive, the big I'm not a boat person, so spray out all the goop in the inside of the boat, the wake boats, and so. It seems to me that's not something we would want right at an access area, because that creates a lot of water and runoff of potential decontaminants into the lake. But the boat washing and inspection stations are less of an impact, is my understanding. And I think they already exist, right? So how do you deal with them right now? Like, you have the greeters and boat washing stations that are I mean, I've seen them at some places. So how does it work now?
It's a great question. I would love to have VC in the room to explain more how these work. There are some that exist now. And I don't want to hypothesize about the semantics of what runs where, but carefully situated spots in access areas where they're not conflicting with uses and where this water is absorbed before it goes back into the lake. And I think to the chair's point, I think the existence of this language in rule is the concern, and ensuring the neighborly aspect of us allowing these in certain areas is the goal here. And I can give you assurances that we're striving toward that, and we have in the past.
So the ones that are there now, you've permitted.
If they're in an access area, we have permit.
Okay, and not everything is an access area, right? So where I'm seeing them might be like a parking lot that's not an unofficial access area. Okay.
Or like Caspian, where we don't own that access area.
Okay, so it's unfortunate that we're all talking about bodies of water that I don't know, so.
Okay.
So I see that there's a couple other hands. I do want to recognize that I'm hoping to get Mr. Carpenter in before 11. If we run out of time, we will find more time for you.
You certainly come back, Madam Chair, but I think my language will help answer some of the confused questions.
Okay, but before we go, did you? Okay, so back.
So just in this conversation that Anna referred to about authorized and permitted. In your world, boat watching stations, and those are authorized, that be correct?
They're permittable. They're not a priority use. So we have a list of
Okay.
priority uses like hunting, fishing.
Okay.
But they are not a priority use and they're not listed as a specified use.
Okay.
Whereas same thing, we wouldn't specify picnic, to use another hot button.
Yeah,
Just as something we allow, but if you want to have a picnic and you come to us and ask for a permit, like we permit weddings, we permit things that are not listed in our rule and the federal.
boat watching stations are not in the.
They're not written.
They're permitted on I guess, a pond or lake bike basis. Okay,
And they come to us and they say, will this work? Yep, it'll work. Here's your permit.
okay, thank you, Doris.
Thank you. Yes,
Just a quick question, so. The boat washing stations are primarily to wash off what came from that lake. If they show up at the access point and they have vegetation or contamination from another lake, they shouldn't be allowed in that, right? You
Correct.
don't wash them there, because
Well,
that
you
could get into
could,
the lake.
you could wash them there as a precaution. But I think this is some of what we're getting at. Exactly.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and so what do you think, Mr. Carpenter? You have about 7 minutes. Would you
I
rather-
could at least sort of do a preview, Madam Chair, if that's your
Sure,
preference,
that's-
otherwise, I mean, I can certainly come back at another point as well, so.
Let's at least take a few minutes here to see what your language is, and then we can talk about it
Now,
further another time. And actually, just to say it out loud, anticipating that we're gonna hear from some folks from Barry, again, about the tournament language. And then I think that's it. And would love to have a committee discussion about the direction that we want to go with this bill, about particularly the parts that feel unresolved. But also just all of it. And then out of that conversation, we'll create a new draft, and then, so that's where we're headed with this. Okay,
so good morning, for the record, Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee, to. Probably make the confusion a little bit more, I am working off of not the draft, it has the fish and wildlife language in it, but I'm working off of draft 2.1. Which is sort of the the last version beforehand, but. So quickly, I worked with Pat from the Vermont Federation of Lakes and Ponds and Barry from Joe's Pond over the course of the last 2 days to try to put together some language. To collaborate on the aquatic nuisance sections and address some of the concerns that are out there. Is everybody thrilled about this? No, this certainly doesn't meet everybody's expectations, but we thought it was a good start for discussion. The first thing is, Senator, as you noted, we're sort of interchangeably using different things when there's actually 3 different, I've learned, ways to address aquatic nuisance species. One is the inspection station, the next one is the boat washing unit, and the next one is decontamination stations. So I figured it would make sense, we figured it would make sense to have definitions of those. Mr. O'Grady probably would want to massage these a little bit, but I think the most important point to note from this is the aquatic nuisance species inspection stations, also the breeder programs, have a minimal space impact. It is a person with usually a lawn chair, beach umbrella, and a card table who are handing out information, doing inspections, collecting data, pointing out when boats have aquatic invasive species on them. Very, very minimal, if any, footprint. Boat washing stations, the next biggest portable units with usually some sort of way to decontaminate exteriors of vessels, and then the decontamination stations are the full ones that, wash out the ballast tanks and the interiors with the hot water and everything.
That's what they're called.
Those are,
Get out the goop.
get out the goop stations. So the focus of a lot of these lakes groups and Lake Champlain Committee is that these fishing access areas are able to accommodate the first one, the inspection stations, and the grading programs, not require decontamination of boat washing units, but we'll get to that in a bit. So changes to section E is that fishing access areas shall accommodate approved aquatic nuisance species inspection stations to allow for inspection of all vessels, trailers, et cetera, looking at E1 here. Number 2 is, use of access areas that shall comply with the federal regulations on 50 CFR Part 80. And if the aquatic nuisance station conflicts with a higher priority use, with the hunting and fishing uses, the Fish and Wildlife Department shall work with the entity managing the aquatic nuisance inspection station, usually one of the local lakes programs and their volunteers, to resolve any conflict or issue that such authorized uses can be reasonably accommodated in prevention of the introduction of the aquatic invasive species into the waters of the state is enhanced. So can parties get together and sort of work on the differences and see if they can work that out? The next section is also section 3 is current language, focuses on the higher priority uses. But what we've done with F is the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Environmental Conservation Lakes and Ponds program will develop guidance, including criteria, conditions, and under what circumstances fishing access areas may include boat washing units or decontamination stations when proposed by any entity. Guidance will be reported back to this committee and the one upstairs by January 15th, 2027. At minimum, guidance will acknowledge that after the requirements of 50 CFR Part 80, the requirements for hunting and fishing access, preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species is a priority at fishing access areas. If deemed necessary, a reasonable effort will be made to accommodate boat washing units or decontamination stations at a specific fishing access area, even if these higher priorities of hunting and fishing access are minimally impacted, as long as this does not significantly impede these higher priorities. So it can have a little bit of an impact, but it can't block it. If it's determined that a boat washing unit or decontamination station is needed at a specific area, but would it significantly impede the use of higher priorities, a reasonable effort will be made to find an alternative location for the boat washing unit or decontamination station as close to the fishing area as possible. Can you find some area that's close by where you can put it that's not going to impede the parking or whatever of that station? Make a reasonable effort. Finally, number 4, boat washing units and decontamination stations must be used in such a manner and location as not to impact the water quality of the adjacent surface waters or any adjacent wetlands. So please don't put the decontamination station right next to the adjacent wetlands and have all the hot water and everything else go into it. So finally, very quickly, because we're almost time's up, there has been some talk about priority uses. We restructured them a little bit because some of them didn't quite make sense to me. But So you'll notice 4.1 hasn't changed, that angling, ice fishing, and launching of any vessel to be used for fishing and parking vehicles and trailers is the first priority use. I'm not sure why hunting, trapping, and parking of vehicles and boat trailers necessary for this was 4.3, when that's supposed to be one of the priority uses. So it's moved up to 4.2. The 4.3 is now approved aquatic nuisance species inspection stations for the inspection of all vehicles, trailers, equipments entering and exiting lakes pursuit. So fishing and hunting are still the priority uses, but the next priority use was trying to address aquatic invasives. And then the other ones are just sort of moved back in. The launching of inboards and the launching of non-motorized vessels. 4.6 is the use of ATVs and snowmobiles are a priority use when being used for ice fishing. I think that could be struck because it has to do with ice fishing, so technically it would be number one, because you're going ice fishing, you're just using your snowmobile, your ATV to get there rather than your feet. So that would be to me a priority, number one use, not a lower down, so. Taking a breath, that is what we have sort of put together to try to make inspection stations, with the greeter program, with a volunteer sitting there in a lawn chair. A priority use in all these areas. They don't have to have their own parking spot, just stick them somewhere in the corner. They can be out of the way, but they can be there. And then the two departments will work together to see if in some of these stations, there is a reasonable way to accommodate a decontamination station or a boat washing station. As sort of a collaborative effort, that we work together on guidance, some rules, some criteria for how that would be determined, so. Mr. O'Grady got this at about 9:30 this morning. So he hasn't had a chance to see it. I didn't have a chance to share it with the departments because same thing, I was tinkering with it. So I will
Thank you. We are,
be sitting in tomorrow morning, Madam Chair, at 9 o'clock if folks have questions, so I
so
will,
to be continued.
I will unplug.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Yep, absolutely, appreciate it. Yes, it sure can. So we did not get the,
Unplugging.
the big room. No, we don't have, it's not available. Okay, good to know.
No, just.
We
We already are.
Well, no, we were outside.
Oh, you were
Yeah,
muted.
yeah. Okay, good morning, this is Senate Natural Resources and
Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs in a joint meeting on a subject that is dear to us all, which is housing development.
yes. And we're gonna be hearing about 802 homes, homes for all, and what that all could mean for the state. So thank you, Mr. Hammer, for being here, so grateful. And just for context, I think our committee has had some of this background, but I think it does not hurt to hear it. Again, I think that there's gonna be a little bit more that we haven't heard, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Yes.
Chair Watson, Chair Clarkson. I'm Jacob Hemrick. I'm a Senior Planning and Policy Manager in the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development, Division of Community Planning and Revitalization. And put together a presentation quickly this morning to give you an overview of Homes for All and to your point, Senator Clarkson, to kind of explain the different components of it and how it relates to 802 homes. Just by way of background, I've held a lot of different roles in municipal and state government, and a thorough planning nerd. It's really have a respect for the legislative roles that you can say.
And Jake, if you could speak up, we're competing with the noise from the vent here,
Yeah, absolutely.
back here.
So I work with this team in the Division of Community Planning and Revitalization, and a lot of what we've been focused on the past 8 years is making it easier to build homes and where we need homes the most and where they are affordable. And I should give credit to Jeff Doobie, who is the project manager for 802 Homes and really the principal for this project. But I've been involved in a lot of pieces in my 8 years in state government. Really, my 8 years in state government has been focused on planning for housing in places where we can afford that housing. That all started in 2013 with the neighborhood development area designation, and that was really the first attempt to ease Act 250 review in communities that updated their zoning to proactively enable housing. The program essentially rewarded municipalities that did the hard work up front, and to create more clear, more predictable pathways to housing in affordable locations. From there, we went to in 2020 to zoning for great neighborhoods. This was a partnership between the ACD, the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, AARP Vermont, and the Vermont Realtors to promote best practices in local zoning bylaws. So it focused on how do we enable infill and missing middle housing by modernizing outdated zoning provisions and providing practical local examples and locally tested models. And we worked with municipalities to put that guide together. From there, we went to bylaw modernization grants with leadership of Senator Clarkson and Senator Hinsdale. More than $1 million was invested to help communities implement zoning for great neighborhoods guidance. So we did the guidance, and then there was funding to help roll it out at the municipal level. And to date, 63 grants were awarded, reaching approximately 1/3 of the communities that have local zoning. So it demonstrated a strong appetite for reform where technical and financial support was available to cities and towns across the state of Vermont. Then in 2023 was the big year for the Home Act. It was earlier efforts primarily aimed at helping communities. The earlier efforts were aimed at communities that were willing to take up reform. The Home Act signaled that Vermont really needed to be all in through sometimes controversial preemption of certain local zoning provisions. So the act made important changes to housing. It increased density, increased allowed uses, and allowed smaller lots. It made a lot of reforms in areas served by water and sewer, as well as residential zoning districts statewide. The Community Partnership for Neighborhood Development was a funding roundtable with $1 million to support uses redevelopment expenses for projects in Senator Hardy's district, Stonecrop Meadows, that has received a lot of publicity. And from there, we went to Act 181, where DHCD led extensive engagement on improving the state's designations program. So those are our downtowns, our village centers, our new town centers, and it worked directly. The work from our engagement produced a report that informed Act 181, and it was all about aligning the state's plans, the state's regulations, and the state's investments in areas planned for growth. And as you know, that's rolling out now. From there, we went into the Homes for All toolkit, which is really the bulk of this presentation. And it was designed really to help win more hearts and minds around infill development and to demystify the development process for new and emerging developers like Jonah Richards in Fairleigh, you may have seen articles about. There's now the chip infrastructure rolling out and the executive order and the homes for all training cohort. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about more of that in details, but I wanted to give you the sense of the timeline as these things roll
No,
out.
it's helpful to see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like your chart.
Yeah.
So when we say the missing middle, sometimes it can get confused with middle income housing. By and large, we're talking about a housing type that's in between the single family home and the large multi-unit putting construction. And those are predominantly where we're seeing a lot of housing growth in the state of Vermont. So focus on missing middle was really about focusing on where can we put homes where there's already existing infrastructure, water, sewer, broadband, electricity lines. And it's also where a lot of Vermont housing improvement funds have been focused to fix up vacant or blighted units. Much of the support for missing middle and infill housing, as I mentioned, flowed through the bylaw modernization grants. So that was 3 years of one-time funding that's still in the municipal and regional planning and resilience fund. But we have for 30 years, the state's invested in municipal planning grants. This is funding derived from the property transfer tax. And in just the past 4 years, 4.6 million of grant funds have been requested, 2.8 million of grant funds have been awarded, serving 160 municipal planning projects, really flexible funding to meet towns, work with planning projects that are their priorities that also meet state priorities, especially projects that relate to housing.
Just a quick clarification question.
Sure.
Are municipal grants, do we need more money from municipal planning grants, is there money in the budget? For more?
I don't believe there's more money in the governor's budget for
But-
addition.
There, I believe there's money proposed elsewhere.
And this comes out of the property transfer tax.
Yes.
So it is a fund that gets 13% of the property transfer tax, when you notwithstand. Or when you don't notwithstand, but I have a proposal I'm hoping to put in somebody's bill. To increase right now the municipal and regional planning percentage of the property transfer.
Thank you. And was that with, because you said there's some else. Okay, got you. Okay, just wanted to make sure that. That's great.
And I highlight these as the two programs that have generally supported municipal actions to change their planning and regulatory program and boost housing production. So the Vermont Homes for All Toolkit was this first phase of this broader effort to make it easier for infill housing. It was a design and do toolkit for small scale developers. It had 3 phases. There was an engagement and design where we worked with communities around the state to see where there are infill opportunities and test fit different housing types that people could be YIMBY about. Yes, in my neighborhood. Yes, I can see that next door to me. Yes, I would love to have that in my community. From there, we developed the training toolkit and cohort. This was all about how do we grow the number of small scale developers throughout the state and demystify how they enter that business. And then phase 3, which we're working on now, the pre-approved designs that added 2 homes. These are construction ready, public domain designs that can be used for regulatory streamlining. We've kicked off this project. It'll close out in December 2026, and I'll break that down a little bit more.
Can I?
Yes, question.
Okay. So I think you're gonna deepen our understanding in the next slide. I think whether it's the toolkit or it is the manufactured housing that we're looking to advance, things often get hung up on the units per acre or the sort of what we mean by infill to make sure that we're not creating a costly purchase with the land that it would take. So I think these are all great things. I just don't want us to lose sight of where they are and how much they're able to drive cost per unit down. Because we've seen projects where they want 2 for an acre instead of 5 for an acre outside of our exemption areas. And that makes the project not doable. So, you know, how we make sure infill means next to other things in a way that drives the land cost down as well.
So the guide really started with infill case studies, and we worked in the towns of Arlington, Bellows Falls, Middlesex, Rutland City, and Virgins to see where there are infill parcels and then what types of homes, what dimensions would work for infill on lots that were identified. And there are often plenty of lots in and around communities when you really do a deeper dig to see where can we put 2 unit, where can we put 3 unit, 4 unit, 6 unit.
Jake,
Yeah, so sorry, Senator Clarkson, I'm just getting over cold, but I'm still a little hoarse. I'll speak more. So,
competition day.
yeah. So this is an example of a vacant flat corner lot, gridded walkable neighborhood, surrounded by 1 and 2 story buildings. It's already got access to water and sewer, good to go. And these were the types of sites that this guidebook really focused on. From there, we looked at potential floor plans that met a variety of needs, like accessible units, like right-sized mechanical closets, reducing down the size of things so that there could be cheaper economies of scale for construction. There was still some storage and functionality, like a little mud space and an entryway, and safety things like primary and secondary egresses. So these Jimmy designs were all about creating affordability by design, but balanced livability and needs of the monitors.
Before you leave that slide, Jake,
Yeah.
I know there'll be this question when you have presented this to the House, you probably already have. Did you also take into consideration in your prototypes, universal design? Because I know that's something you're all.
Yeah, not all units were universal design, but the larger, like this is an example of a side-by-side plus one, so a threeplex, with the back unit was ADA accessible, and you can see the ramp kind of where it says accessible, it's underneath where there's an accessible unit.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but it was not all units were ADA accessible, but it was meeting the code thresholds.
Right.
Here's a question.
Thank you. Sort of. Your training for potential developers, I shared a lot of information with my constituents recently and I was trying to figure out like. What is the definition of a developer? Because I think sometimes people think, oh, if you're a developer, you're like the developer of Stonecrop Meadows, like you do some huge thing. But it can also mean somebody who just turns their single building into a duplex. And right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. I think it's the person who's taking the financial risk to do the building and
Right.
sort of manage the project.
So I'm wondering how we can sort of. Make people feel comfortable with the, oh, I could be a developer too, kind of thing, within reason, obviously.
Yeah.
And maybe you do that in your training, but.
Yeah, absolutely. And this book was really about helping people who are like plumbers or realtors.
Yeah.
Tradespeople with money to park and they're ready to invest and grow their business in a different way.
Yeah.
It helps them understand like what the other aspects of the development business are involved in the development business. And it's all small scale, 6 person below, but to the simple accessory dwelling unit developer for somebody who wants to build a home in their backyard.
Yeah, because I think sometimes the word developer is intimidating to people, so I don't know if there's another way to say it.
Tag onto that, we have copies on the toolkit. It would be great if you bring another copy because I think lots of us took them home.
Yeah, we can do that.
And it would be great if we had some more. And the other, what was the other piece? Oh, I also had a question to tag on Ruth's question. I had asked, how do small scale developers even know about this project? How are you promoting it?
Yeah, so the department's promoting it through a variety of partners that we have involved in the partner and in this project. And you can see in the second to last slide, there's a list of all the partner organizations that we're working with.
Okay.
We're using the newsletter to promote the training opportunities. And so those first training sessions and the registrations are rolling out just now. You'll see the dates on a subsequent slide, but promotion's underway.
Okay, great, sure.
Yeah. Part of the development, the Homes for All Toolkit found that there's a sweet spot for small scale. It's really the 1 to 4 units based on different code thresholds. And this is really a great spot for the new developer to get started because there's lower risk. There's more financing available, there's fewer code thresholds, it's just easier to start with. And then sweet spot number 2 is 5 to 11 units. So the builder's workbook provided step-by-step guidance in the toolkit, roles in small-scale development, how to identify development-ready sites, how to build your team, business and financial framework, ways to measure feasibility methodology, including template pro formas, permitting and construction. So we really broke it down step by step to make it a little bit easier. So anybody like Senator Hardy, if you know people in your district that are interested in this, I would absolutely point them to this website and this resource. And we're available to answer questions from people who might be interested.
Okay, and then question you.
It kind of goes back to Senator Harden's question about definition of a developer, because I'm thinking, you know, you've gone to the next step, because we always used to think of general contractor. Do they still fit into this picture?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Although sometimes typically though, we would think of like the developer hiring a general contractor, unless the general contractor is assuming the financial risk and will own the product at the end.
Because we don't have developer development. I think.
But you have general
now,
contracting.
We have a lot of general contracting, so.
So I was waiting for the part where this becomes by right.
We're almost there.
Great, okay. Let's get there.
So the home scroll training, some of the questions you asked about, these are the dates for this training. This is the promotion poster, this is the link where people can sign up for that training. So we developed the toolkit. Now there's this training resource that's rolling out for small scale developers. So it's more than just reading a book, it's going to coursework and having mentors like John and Jeff Dunbar and Bellas Falls, who are developers in that community. So 82 homes. These are going to be the third phase, 10 home designs, each designed for 2 ways of construction. One is on-site traditional framing, and another is off-site modular construction. So factory built construction. They'll be up to a 6-plex, and they'll build on the home sprawl toolkit prototype designs, but they'll get to that construction ready drawings. So that the general contractor can take this design and apply it to a development site. There are many benefits to this offsite housing. It's generally that it's faster. The quality can be more consistent, particularly with energy efficiency, because the same person is doing windows every day. They get really, really good at it. Or the insulation. And it reduces a lot of on-site building construction. So those are the key benefits, faster and cheaper. We have development ready community partners right now in Essex Junction, Hartford, and Manchester that we're working with to go through the process of identifying eligible sites again in different communities than we did in phase 1, to test the home designs with the community and work with them to explore ways in their local codes that they can make it easier for would-be housing developers. So to streamline that process for administrative approvals at the local level.
We have time. Quick question, so for the first 5, do you have data about, have they moved forward in those communities with projects that are a result of the work you did in them?
We've heard a little bit of anecdotal. We haven't done a survey yet, but we do have an annual planning planning survey that we do every 3 years. That's going to be coming out this March.
Okay.
And are thinking about how can we integrate some questions about the implementation.
Yeah, that would be helpful to
of
see.
this. Yeah, but it's anecdotal at this point where we hear from the project, or developers are talking about how they're using those designs as inspiration for working with their architects. But we don't have a product yet where they can take a construction ready drawing and hand it off to the permitting authorities, the building code, fire marshals, or a state delegating building code permitter.
Well, I just know that there are some things happening in Virgins. I just don't know if they're a result of this project or not, and it'd be nice to know, like, what was the impetus, if anything.
So as Elizabeth paused, I have a couple of questions. So one, you mentioned you have 10 designs.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get to this, but wondering if, because it looks like there's a variety of kinds of homes, but wondering if there is, if you could see a need for more than 10 kinds of designs.
Well, I think, yeah, more than 10 would provide more flexibility. The cost to produce, these designs, it's a $500,000 contract.
For each one.
No, for those 10 designs.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
for 10, it was
Yeah.
500. Okay.
If you look at that, one state had 20, and given what state that was. Then similar growth.
So,
And so start. The other question about these, do the three towns have similar permitting, zoning and code? What's making it easier to do those three towns?
So no, they're all very different types of communities.
Right. So,
Different permitting styles, but
because one of the things that came through loud and clear on this fabulous program on National Public Radio last night, Building Tomorrow, was one of the things that would be great to work towards is regional building code, so that you could then build faster, more efficiently, and then you could reduce the time in getting all the permitting, and you're working on permitting and zoning uniformity here, but not building codes yet.
yeah, and most of the building code is fairly uniform across the state as administered by the Division of Fire Safety and the fire marshals. However, there are 10 delegated communities there, most of the larger cities in the state of Vermont, where there's an agreement with the Division of Fire Safety to have a separate building code, and sometimes there's differences between the state code and those local codes that are administered. In these cases, it's really about how do we streamline the local approval to get the administrative permit, so it doesn't have to go through before discretionary review by an appropriate municipal panel, whether that be the planning commission or the development review board, that it can be permitted by the zoning administrator, the administrative officer, without having to go through before a hearing. So
no appeal.
well, it still could be appealed, but it's faster and there's less likely to be appealed. So
That's the permitted use piece that I think is the only thing we could do to potentially limit costly, timely, delaying appeals. Is to make things a permitted use. You're saying that this would still be appealable, like somebody doesn't want something next to them. Doesn't matter if it's approved and up to code. They can still appeal it. I think that is the problem that we are trying to solve. Because otherwise, I don't think that's as many of these will be built as could be,
Yeah.
because they are infill.
yeah, and under the act right now, the Municipal and Regional Planning Act, all municipal land use permits have an appeal function and different noticing requirements. So there's less notices involved if it just is a zoning permit that can be administratively approved by the zoning administrator. And those permits can then be appealed to the local board or zoning board of adjustment, depending upon.
And some of these could still be appealed in Act 250.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the problem. So we're not solving that problem.
Well, they could, in the bill they're taking up and the appeals.
Well, I hope we solve that problem this year, because that's what the cost of a multi-unit, small missing middle building. If it's ownership, if it's, even someone owns one side and rents another side. The thing that scares people away is you could get appealed twice
Yeah.
in the process, and people generally do that when something's infill.
Mhm.
So unless we limit the duplication of appeals at the very least, I don't see that we've solved any problem.
Well, it's all stuff.
Like what?
But this is the addition.
I mean, really, like what?
Well, an administrative permit is, they tend to be much less lengthy than they're much quicker and so I think that it goes a long way for solving the problem.
How do you know they're more likely, they're less?
Because I'm like, but they are.
I think Montpelier told us differently last year. I mean, a lot of communities came in and said, get rid of the appeal of a municipal decision. That's the biggest barrier we have to 3 to 12 unit housing.
Yeah. I will say that my experience is Milton's planning and economic development director. It was most often the developer who was appealing for the municipality's decision when I was there, but that's been more than 8 years ago. And
But that was probably because they wanted fewer units.
Or they dislike the condition, that the development board put on the project,
Thank you.
So, the project schedule, we're gonna end this, project, of developing the catalog by December 2026, so well, we're now actually in February.
I was gonna
With that
say,
red,
I'd like to
over a
go
little
back
bit.
in time, but I don't know back then.
That's where we are. And so beyond the 802 homes, we're in conversation with the finance and banking community because we know there's still some financial pinch points and lending, particularly with accessory dwelling units that make it tough for individual homeowners to get financing. We know there's workforce development pinch points, particularly with tradespeople, plumbers, electricians, contractors. We're working with the energy efficiency community to make sure that these align with the tier 3 incentives and the energy code requirements. And then the other thing that's really gonna help, I think, supercharge a huge pinch point is CHIP, because infrastructure is often the barrier to housing development. And I know, like in Colchester, if they had just had a slightly larger pipe, they could unlock 600 units. I know in Milton, we had permitted units that weren't built in the hundreds because of issues around street construction or signalized intersections, things like that. So I think the infrastructure pinch points are important. And then we're exploring pilot communities within the already communities in Ghana. So these are this is the big picture, and these are the partners that we're working with and advertising with.
So they're doing what? They're helping.
We're advertising the training, we're advertising the training opportunities that US Bell Center.
Okay, so when that's the question, how are people gonna know about it?
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions, this is going back to really one of your first slides about the timeline, that there's been an incredible amount of work that has led up to this point. Do you think that the work that we have done up until this point is making a difference on the ground in terms of housing starts?
Yeah, I think it is. And we're seeing that in the housing tracker, with the number of permits that are being used. So there's an accelerating permits, but it's hard to say if it's directly related to the permitting reform or the funding boost. I think it's everything.
Yeah, so it's the combination, but it seems to be we're at some kind of an inflection point for the housing.
Yeah.
But that's okay, that's encouraging. And then I wanted to ask about something that you just were talking about in terms of the pinch points, because the pinch points are interesting, right? And like, what are the bottlenecks to developing more housing? You mentioned infrastructure as a leading factor. Is there, just digging a little bit deeper in that, is infrastructure data? I mean, one of the things that we've talked about in our committee is water and sewer connections, and we certainly heard from communities that were like, we cannot build housing further slope because we'd have to build a new pump station, etc. And so we know that just the infrastructure is a bottleneck. But to what degree is that infrastructure data not being available eventually?
To the extent, I think it's a pinch point to the extent that developers don't have transparency about where the available water and sewer.
There are maps about that, and we've seen maps of where every water and sewer is.
There's no comprehensive statewide map that there have been maps that have been provided in 2017 by the regional planning commissions that were best available maps. But in terms of, and sometimes there's sewer service areas and sometimes they don't really know where the pipes are. And we ran into this with Pinefield with their neighborhood development area where they didn't exactly quite know where the sewer lines were. And so they hadn't been GIS map. So this is a big data gap map.
I also just want to say, for Plainfield's sake, it's not, this is very common.
No, it's very common. Yeah.
It's not
It's Plainfield. It's very common. Yeah.
It's very common that people don't know where their sewer lines are.
Or water.
Well, they don't have the GIS map, so.
And it's bizarre.
Yeah.
We just,
They're
like,
like,
yes,
yes, and they're like 100 years
But they
old.
have good records in the 19th century.
There's a couple of.
The other thing that also don't know is capacity.
Yes.
Right, so that was a different issue.
So I think that if we could get some sort of a statewide system for really understanding where the lines are, what the capacity is, what the range is, and can the people, who does that? Is anybody doing that? Actually
Well,
Yeah.
the University of Vermont, Center for Complex Systems with the late Center funding did a first swing at it, and I think they got maybe 60% of the state done with student labor. So it hasn't been QA'd by professionals, but it's gotten mostly there through that, and I think that was, oh, I'm trying to remember the amount, I think it was $150,000 from the Lady Center. So,
We have Senator Hardy in front of him.
Thank you. I can't see everybody up there, but I don't see VLCT, but I'm assuming they're one of them.
Oh, yeah, they're
At
top
the
there.
top,
Oh,
of course, it is in text.
But VCRD, the Vermont Council on Rural Development,
Yep.
are they on there? Because the reason I asked specifically about them is there are a couple towns in my district that are very small rural towns that have been working with them on sort of community
Yeah.
plans and one in particular, the town of New Haven, they just finished theirs, they're interested in housing.
Right.
They have lots that they're trying to identify. I've tried to push them towards some of your resources, but especially for these smaller towns that don't have access to as many of the sophisticated things, that VCRD might be helpful.
VCRD is not on there.
I don't see them on there, but, I know they're working with a lot of towns, little.
Yeah, and we do work with VCRD closely, but.
But they're key because they, with all their visioning projects where they're working with every town developing vision for the future. It would be great for them to
Yeah,
be selling this too.
yeah.
Could we'll look at some of Roslindale and then some of the rest.
So if you go back to your timeline slide, I certainly know a lot of the things on there as the bills that we wrote. It was the one with our bills and your
Towards the beginning.
input of the timeline of the law.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
It's the, yeah.
So
Slide.
I worry that in 2024. We really diverged in terms of tier 1A, B, 2, 3, and whatever was going on with the state designation programs. I still honestly don't have a handle of how they are supposed to overlay. And I think that could be very helpful in unlocking the potential of 1B2.
Yes.
Particularly, we were supposed to have new growth areas and all kind, and like transition zones along transit corridors. And I have not heard that in relation to the tier conversation at all.
Well, yeah, and I can't speak for the natural resources board.
Well, so I was actually just having this exact
Okay.
conversation with Charlie Baker yesterday, and so we are gonna be having him on our agenda anyway, on Thursday to talk.
Okay.
Like how these things all
Because we,
map to each other.
when we were writing Act 181, we used the growth centers and the idea, and when we said we're getting a new one, so we can see how much bigger we could make these, because they should be all water and sewer, frankly, should be tier 1B. I heard you bring that up on Friday online, like, we were supposed to use both of these to expand the areas that would be exempt from Act 250. That was the point of the exemption, it's gonna flow right into the tiers and the designated areas, and 2024, since then, it's like gone awry, I think. And the benefits of being a designation program should couple really well with getting tier 1A.
And really, and my understanding is that they do, it's about better planning, there's the regional planning report, better regulation and necessary updates to Act 50 report, and designation 2050, so better community investment, those three reports came together. As drafted Act 181, and what it did is they recognized the regional planning future land use area for categories of future land use will automatically establish designation upon approval by the land use review process. So that's downtown and village centers, planned growth areas, village areas. All water sewer areas should be 1B unless the municipality opts out.
Exactly.
Sounds like
That's what
maybe
we wrote.
Colchester and Essex have opted out, as I understand, in
Right.
King County.
So even if we're not willing to
Yeah.
opt it out, we were supposed to design it so that people could understand, besides what's tier 1B, because that's like a gourmet concept, what is a growth center?
Gourmet.
And gourmet,
Yeah.
a lot of environments.
Well,
gourmet.
and my understanding too is that the way that the designation, the designated areas, particularly for the community investment board purposes, doesn't line up very well, and so Charlie's gonna be bringing some proposals to try to help
Right.
make them.
Right.
Better, so.
Yeah.
Given our time, we may want to move, if you'd stay active in the conversation after we finish with our other two witnesses, I think then we'll have to hopefully some time for more questions.
Super.
Our next witness,
Is Jennifer Murray, planning, Director of Planning and Zoning, codes in Hanover, New Hampshire, but as I understand it, Jennifer is formerly of Middlebury and was very influential in the zoning update that allowed Stone Crop Meadows to happen, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi Ruth.
Hi, Jennifer.
Long time no see. We used to be neighbors. How can I help you, Jake and company? What sort of things would you like to hear from me today?
well, introduce yourself first for the record.
Okay,
And,
great.
And then I have some questions I can propose.
Perfect.
Yes.
Jennifer Murray. I was the planning director in Middlebury for just about 10 years. Before that, I worked in Williston and Jericho. Yeah, so I've been a practicing planner for quite some time. And you're right, we did do a bylaw revision just prior to the Stone Crops Meadows project. That bylaw modernization was done with a municipal planning grant, but it wasn't just a standalone thing. Like we changed the zoning and then an amazing development happened. So spread the word. It was a very long multi-year process where we started in 2019 with a downtown master plan that identified proposed development areas. So when you're thinking about that infill and you're worried about those neighbors appealing, choosing some really good sites where people are receptive to change or receptive to a new neighborhood is helpful. And then that followed with the bylaw modification grant and project, and that lasted from 2021 to about 2022. And then in 2022, we were lined up to get our neighborhood development area designation. So we got the designations that go with these things. And so we just sort of set up all the dominoes so that by the time Middlebury College was ready to buy a parcel and bring in a developer to partner with, we already had that highlighted on our zoning map. And we had some really good zoning that we had started to build some buy-in for, that we were able to pass at exactly the right time to get everything to fall down nicely. So
That's great.
I don't know if you wanted to know that or not, but I always like to spread the word that it wasn't just a bylaw change.
Cool. Well, and one of the things that you mentioned was that you all accessed a municipal planning grant, which is something that we were talking about a little bit earlier. Do you have a sense of how much that municipal planning grant was, and I don't know if you have a sense of like what's typical for municipal planning grants?
Oh, boy, Jake is the expert on that. They're around 30,000, aren't they?
Yeah, the max awards are 30,000. Not all, some grants are smaller than that.
They're not that big, we get a big bang for the buck here.
Yeah, it's huge bang for the buck. Yeah.
And we had a consultant that really helped us out too. She met a tight deadline, and I think she ate some costs because she really believed in this bylaw modernization. So that was Brandy Saxon, who used to do a lot of work across Vermont.
Sure. And actually, just to dig into that, so how did the modernization actually enabled something like Stone Crop Meadows to happen? Like what changed that made that so functional?
Right. Well, we kind of worked backward from the neighborhood development area designation. And so the neighborhood development area designation, in order to do that, you need to prove, as you should, when you're building a new neighborhood, that you're going to build a neighborhood that fits well in the community. And so it has some basic sort of urban design concepts built in. It's just a simple checklist. And we weren't able to get all the way through the checklist with our very old zoning. So we knew that we wanted to update it so that anything new that we built functioned as a really good walkable community that was close to amenities, and where people would be proud and able to live, and that it would look like the rest of Middlebury. And if you go by there, I think it looks pretty good. I don't know how Ruth feels about it, but I think it looks pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there will be little parks, right, and a bike path and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I may have started out just kind of skeptical, like, why is Jake making me do all these things for this ND through this designation? But then once I got into it and I was updating the bylaw, which I was able to do because money came from Vermont to be able to hire the consultant to work with me to make it happen. I was really glad we did it, and I'm really proud of it now. And weirdly, Summit was already sort of in conversation to do the Stone Crop Meadow project with the college, so they helped me with the bylaw revision as well. So they were able to make a couple tweaks at the end, and then we passed the bylaw. They were there when we passed the bylaw, so they had buy-in right from the start. So to come all around Robin Hood's barn to answer your question, it allowed us to kind of bring the developer on board and have their buy-in in what the bylaw change was going to be. It allowed us to lay out street networks and conserve green spaces and create sidewalks and on-street parking and all of those things to make it a really useful community. And the developer was okay with that because they've been through this before, and they knew that a really good functional community allows them to sell their market rate units at a decent price, and allows, you know, their non-market rate units to be a nice neighborhood for them. So
Thank you. I think we have another question here. I have more questions. Go ahead.
Jennifer, I think some of us were at the Stone Crop Meadows groundbreaking, so maybe you were there as well. And something was said that made me feel like I can die happy. The city council president, select board chair president, Brian Carpenter said, we have a target of 500 units of housing in Middlebury, and these are 250 of our 500 units. Let's get working to build the rest. That feels like really good planning to me. And I know you said you're trying to sort of go where there's more political will. But you know, how do you see as a planner using the tools we've created to get those 250 additional units in Middlebury?
I'm glad you said that back to me, Keisha, because it wasn't just political will, it was also water and sewer, walkability from downtown, and all of the other things that NDA designation really tries to target. So if you look at the map we created in the downtown master plan of lots that we thought were vacant and had good potential, it aligns really nicely with our NDA designation. So that's one tool that we used to try to identify that area. Yeah, and it's not just housing units either. It's not just 250 random units. A lot of them are the missing middle housing type that Jake referenced that is really hard to get to. And we had a big subsidy to accomplish that through ARPA funds that came through the state. The program had a name I'm not remembering, the Missing Middle Housing Fund, I guess. So that was an essential tool too.
We're gonna move to Mr. Bremer, but if you have one more question, Senator.
No, that's okay.
Okay, and then
Jennifer.
I do have one more question, which could I think be for both of you potentially. So I'm gonna ask it later. But Mr. Bremer, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. We met some of us met you up in Fairlane this summer as we were all touring around.
Yeah, we have had a spate of multifamily housing starts, permitting issued. Now it's a matter of keeping the funding together for the projects. We kind of rolled in before the modernization effort at the state level, and it was interesting as we went through with our regional, looking at our bylaw, are you going to be in conformity? And it's like, well, we kind of already are. We treat 1 and 2 family dwellings identically and have for the last 15 years. Apartment houses are a permitted use in the zone. You know, we allow people to add ADUs up to 900 square feet. So a lot of those things were already accomplished. What we really have a hard time working around is that through a set of historic circumstances, Fairleigh has an extensive and well-developed water system. But at the same time, it's built on top of what's called a glacial esker. And what that means is we're sand and gravel 100 feet deep underneath the village. Literally the best conditions you could possibly have for septic systems and that sort of thing. And we have been looking at designs for, call it low flow community septic especially under like the playing fields at Samuel Moore Elementary, that sort of thing. But we kind of feel like the tier system doesn't know what to do with these larger water system villages. And as you come up the Connecticut River Valley, you will find these little clumps of density, and they're there because there were good soils on the one hand and a good water source on the other. And we kind of believe that these water system villages on this side of the state are a real squandered resource. They can support higher levels of density, but they're kind of dying on the vine for lack of capital investment. And we noticed this with the tier map that we're dealing with and kind of negotiating with our regional on. They've entirely excluded from that tier 1B area and the south part of our village, which is actually got water infrastructure in the ground right now. And it feels like someone looked at a topo map without actually getting on the ground and looking at the local geography, both the human geography and our geology and our topography and so on. And we're kind of struggling with how we're going to deal with the mapping with our regional. They've left an entire commercial section of town out of that tier 1B. And I don't know if any other town is making similar observations about dealing with their regionals or not.
Yes,
Yes, they are.
yes. They are.
Questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
How much headway do you feel like you're making on that front? I mean, have you gotten a land use review board member to agree to come to your community and walk around and look at that?
Currently, I think we're going to have to go to the senior planner. We're gonna have to go over somebody's head, I believe, to actually get any adjustments to the map.
Do you mean at your district level or?
In that regional planning commission level.
Okay,
Are you with Two Rivers, are you with Two Rivers towns?
We are.
Yeah, you're the most northern town in the Two Rivers district, I think.
Bradford is the
Oh,
next.
Bradford, sorry.
And
yeah.
I believe Newberry is in that as well.
Oh.
So one question for the both of you, what would you identify as the most useful tweak or fix or support that would be practically speaking on the ground, the most useful thing to getting more housing starts in your area?
Money?
Okay.
Thank you, that goes to revenue bill.
Well, that I think that's important to recognize, right? Like,
Right.
when I think about there's the regulatory barriers, there's financial barriers that you're saying is money.
It's money and infrastructure.
And infrastructure.
Money for what?
Oh, yeah.
Be a little more.
Thank you. Could you mind going a little bit deeper? Money for what?
Well, one thing I've noted is that we've done a really good job in Vermont at eroding the tax. What's the word I'm looking for? We've eroded the taxing ability of small towns. Often what happens is taxes go up, property taxes go up because of the state school taxing system. And the voters only have one level of government that they can get their hands on and shake, and that tends to be the town government. So town governments are desperate to cut their budgets and level fund, and money just isn't going into sidewalks, playgrounds, that sort of thing, because they're desperate to shave another 1% or 2% off because the state school tax has gone up. And one suggestion I would have is, you're asking towns to adopt a 1% option tax when it's politically impossible for them to do so. I think one big thing you could do is make the option tax just automatic.
That is an interesting suggestion. Ms. Murray, if you're up for answering the same question.
Yeah, sure. You know, from a developer's perspective, I like to think of it as a really simple formula with a little equal sign in the middle. And one side is the cost to construct. And on the other side is what people can afford. Sometimes they talk about it in terms of their salaries. And so that we get so caught up in all these little nuances of how we can balance that equation, right? Like we were talking earlier about land costs and, you know, oh, land cost is the problem, or like, oh, shoot, the development cost is the problem, or permits, okay, now you're balancing one side of the equation, but where we're having trouble is the other side of the equation. People just need to be able to make enough to be able to afford what it costs to build the housing. And until the developer can get that equation straight, you know, we can't work with them on the local level either. So what I found in where I am now and in Middlebury, like we've done a really good job of, you know, deregulating and making the zoning simpler and streamlining the processes. And yes, there's always work that can be done. And that's kind of a planner's work. We know that when we get our degree and come to a town, right? It's always our job to make that easier, but we've made it really, really easy and we're still not seeing the units coming online. So there's something else that we need to focus on. I know in Hanover, we're working on exactly, and I'm going to steal Jake's work like crazy. Like we are working on like coming up with little models as is our neighboring community, Lebanon, working on model homes that people can plug in and use for ADUs, because there's a little bit of, they choke a little bit when they're trying to figure out, oh, how can I build a house? That's a really hard thing to understand. There's contractors and there's developers. Developers know a little bit more than contractors do, right? So anything you can do to get these little local contractors built up to be more like developers and really focus on that, I think is helpful. So what's an easier way to say that? Doing anything you can to build local capacity. Local capacity might be adding really experienced planners at the regional planning level or the local level, or, you know, getting these contractors to learn how to be developers and understand those nuances. And I think it's important, especially in a state like Vermont, where every community is so unique, to build that local capacity in any way that you can, because otherwise you just have these very clunky top-down tools of like, oh, we just need to add more units per acre, or just like allow anyone on water sewer to have this many units or whatever. You know, I think those top-down solutions result in communities being more alike. And I think it ignores the fact that every community is different and every project is different. And that's why it's so, you have such a big task ahead of you to understand all of that on your end. So yeah, just building local capacity. And I think that the 802 program is heading in the right direction there.
We have a question from Senator Beck, and then I have a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just for a comment, we were running out of time here. I think the other equation though that we all need to is the cost to construct versus the asset value. And right now they are totally out of whack. And if you know, when you come back, if you have some estimates of what these homes are expected to cost to construct versus what you think the asset values, what they would be, regional, town, whatever. Because unless we solve that, the only way you purchase a home in Vermont is if you come to the table with a big bag of cash and you're willing to lose it.
Or with losing vacancy rate.
Yeah. One further thing, you mentioned, you know, that every town is different. And so I want to ask specifically about this idea that is being piloted in the 3 different communities where it's Essex, Hartford, and Manchester. Where ideally, if I'm not mistaken, you would have with these designs, you'd be able to go to the fire marshal and say, this is, it is the vision that this would be pre-approved.
Right. That's, I think,
Is
the
that
objective is that this is all code compliant, it fits every zoning, permitting and code compliant. And then it's ready to go, is the whole point, I think, of this.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that more or less accurate?
I think that's the end goal is to streamline the permitting process, and so that they're recognized as much as they can be in the local permitting process and the state permitting process.
And do we have a report coming back to us
Yeah.
about how that goes?
What's the pilot report after these, how long do they have to do these, and when is the report due, and
You mean, what will the final designs look like?
No, so after you do these in Essex and
in
Hartford and
Hartford,
Manchester. What is it?
Hartford, Essex, and Manchester.
Yeah, is there sort of a, maybe not an end time, but we've been through it and you see how it goes, and is there gonna be a report on it as to how it went?
Well, the outreach in the community is really about helping develop the designs, the deliverable
Okay.
is the design, it's not a.
Okay,
Yeah.
But,
I guess I'm also thinking about that potential future expansion.
right,
And I know we've got to wrap up here, but interested in the tension between wanting to streamline the process
Yeah.
and the local conditions are different everywhere. As Mr. Brimmer was.
yeah, that's why I asked that at the beginning, was how uniform are those three towns in their permitting and building, the building code we have in Vermont, but the permitting and the zoning, how similar are they? So that I would hope we'd end up with a pilot where we could roll this out and grow it.
Yeah.
So when is it due?
So December 2026 is when the designs be available, and there will be some sort of summary of findings put together
Okay.
for the outreach of those communities.
With that, I think we should probably adjourn.